It was a Tuesday in late October when my entire life almost got stolen from me, and I was sitting in a parking garage eating a sad desk salad when I found out. My phone buzzed with an email. Subject line: Notice of legal action. Response required within 14 days. I almost swiped it away thinking it was spam. I get those sometimes. Phishing attempts, fake IRS notices, the usual noise, but something made me tap it open. It was from a law firm in Atlanta. The letterhead was real. The case number was real. And the name listed as the primary respondent on a civil fraud complaint was mine, Lydia Hargrove. That's me. I sat there in my car with the engine off and the salad fork frozen halfway to my mouth, reading the same paragraph over and over. According to the complaint, a woman named Lydia Hargrove, me, had entered into a series of fraudulent investment agreements with private investors totaling $280,000, accepted those funds, and failed to deliver on the contracted terms. The complainants were seeking full restitution plus damages. $280,000. I have never signed an investment agreement in my life. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I make $54,000 a year. I have a studio apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, a 7-year-old Honda Civic, and exactly $4,000 in savings I have been protecting like it's a vital organ. Have you ever felt like the floor just disappeared under you? Not the dramatic movie version where everything goes slow motion. The real version, where your brain just goes quiet and flat, like a signal that suddenly has nothing to carry. That's what I felt. And then, underneath it, something else started to surface. Something I recognized. Because this wasn't entirely a surprise. Not completely. Let me back up. I grew up watching my mother, Sandra, perform. That's the only word for it. She performed the role of the strong, resourceful, always managing Southern woman. She performed at church. She performed at the neighborhood association meeting she organized and chaired for 15 years straight. She performed at every dinner table and holiday gathering, and she was very, very good at it. The audience loved her. What the audience didn't see was me, from the age of 16, quietly co-signing things. Quietly handing over birthday money, graduation money, tax return money. Quietly absorbing the guilt when I tried to say no. You would not believe what a woman like my mother can do with the phrase, "After everything I have done for you." She can make you feel like you owed her a debt that predated your own birth. My brother, Tyler, was different. Tyler was the one she worried about. Tyler was the one who needed help. Always. He was between jobs, between girlfriends, between plans. He was 31 and still living in the house I grew up in. And somehow, this was framed as loyalty rather than stagnation. I was the one who left for college, got a degree, got a second degree, got licensed, got a job I actually cared about. And somehow, in the family accounting my mother kept in her head, that meant I owed them. I paid off Tyler's car once, $3,000, because the dealership was about to repossess it and my mother called me at 11 at night crying. I paid 2 months of the mortgage on the house when my mother said she was behind. I loaned Tyler $1,500 for what he said was a security deposit on an apartment he never moved into. Every single time there was a reason, a crisis, a story. And every single time I paid. Not because I was naive. I want to be clear about that. I knew what was happening. I paid because the alternative, the phone calls, the guilt, the family WhatsApp messages where my mother would vaguely post Bible verses about abandonment, was more expensive to my nervous system than the money itself. That's the thing nobody tells you about being the capable one in a dysfunctional family. It's not that you don't see it, it's that you calculate the cost of resistance and decide it's too high. Until one day, the cost of not resisting is higher. That Tuesday in the parking garage was that day. I drove home in a kind of focused trance. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text Tyler. I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a yellow legal pad and I started writing down everything I knew. Every payment. Every transfer. Every conversation I could remember where my name came up in connection with money or documents or anything financial. And then I called the only person I trusted with this. Her name is Simone, and she is a paralegal at a civil litigation firm in Charlotte. She's been my closest friend since the second week of grad school. We both showed up early to the same Thursday seminar and ended up talking for 2 hours in the hallway about everything except the seminar. She is the most precise, unsentimental person I know, and I say that with complete love. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which she only does when something is serious enough that she's already building a mental framework while I'm still talking. When I finished, she said, "Lydia, this is bad, but it is not unfixable. Do not call your mother yet. Do not respond to the law firm. Call me back in 20 minutes. She called back in 17. "Okay," she said. "I talked to one of our attorneys here, off the record. The complaint is real and it has been filed. The investment agreements list you as the managing partner of an LLC. Do you know anything about an LLC?" I did not know anything about an LLC. "I was afraid of that," she said. "Someone formed it in your name. Your name, your social security number, your old home address, the one on file from when you lived with your mother. And then they used this LLC to collect investor funds." I pressed my palm flat against the table to keep it from shaking. "Tyler," I said. "Don't say that out loud to anyone else yet," Simone said. "But yes, that's the working theory. Get me every piece of documentation you have. Bank statements, tax returns, everything. We are going to file a response establishing that your identity was used without your consent, and we are going to do it before that 14-day window closes." That was the beginning, the part of the story where I thought I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I was wrong. 3 days after Simone's firm filed the emergency response on my behalf, identity theft, fraudulent appropriation, forged authorization, her supervising attorney, a man named Davis who I'd spoken to exactly once on the phone, called me directly. "Ms. Bunn." "Hargrove," he said, and something in his voice made me put down my coffee cup. "We've been pulling the formation documents for the LLC. We found the registered agent." I waited. "The person who filed all of this," he said slowly, "is listed as your aunt. Her name is Frances. Do you know her?" I went completely still. Aunt Frances, my mother's older sister. The one who had moved away from Atlanta 15 years ago under what the family described, whenever anyone dared bring it up, as disgraceful circumstances. The one my mother never spoke about except in the past tense, as if she were dead. The one who, according to the story I had been told since childhood, had stolen from the family business my grandfather built, embezzled, forged, nearly bankrupted everyone, and then disappeared rather than face accountability. "That's impossible," I said. "My Aunt Frances is not someone my family has any contact with. She did something bad a long time ago. She wouldn't be involved in my life." Davis was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Hargrove," he said carefully, "I need to tell you that we ran a background search. There is no record of any criminal conviction or civil judgment against a Frances Hargrove in the state of Georgia. No fraud. No embezzlement. Nothing." The kitchen felt very small. "That doesn't mean it didn't happen," I said. But even I could hear how hollow it sounded. "No," he said, "but it does mean we need to ask her directly. She has agreed to speak with us. She has been trying to reach you, through us. She says she's been waiting for an opportunity to talk to you for a long time." My Aunt Frances was waiting for me in Davis's conference room 2 days later, and she was not what I expected. I had built a picture of her in my head over 20 years of absence. Careless, unstable, someone who burned things down and moved on, the villain in my mother's story. The woman in that conference room was in her early 60s, composed and quiet, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a leather portfolio open on the table in front of her. She looked like someone who had organized her life with intention. She looked, honestly, like someone who had built something and kept it. She looked at me the way you look at someone you've been worried about for a long time. "You look like your father," she said. "You have his eyes." I sat down across from her and I did not know what to feel. "You're supposed to be the one who stole from the family," I said. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I just needed to say it out loud to someone who could answer. She nodded slowly. "I know that's what you were told. It isn't what happened." She paused. "Do you want the version with all the details or the version that will get us to what matters right now?" "Both," I said. She told me. 15 years ago, my grandfather's business, a regional property management company he'd built over 30 years, was in the process of being transitioned to the next generation. My Aunt Frances had been working in it her whole adult life. My mother, Sandra, had married into a comfortable position beside it. When my grandfather got sick and the succession conversation started, Frances had wanted to grow the business, modernize it, reinvest. My mother wanted to sell it, take the cash, distribute it, live well. They disagreed. The argument became a fracture. And then, according to Frances, my mother did what my mother has always done when she wants to win something. She performed, she told the story. She told the family, told the lawyers, told anyone who would listen that Frances had been mismanaging funds, had been siphoning money, couldn't be trusted. She got signatures on documents Frances hadn't seen. She moved fast, and she moved first. And by the time Frances understood what was happening, the narrative was already set. Frances left. Not because she was guilty. Because she looked at the situation and calculated correctly that fighting it would cost more than she had in her at the time, but she kept records. She had kept records for 15 years. "I couldn't come to you until you were ready," she said. "I tried once when you were in college. I sent you a letter. I thought about that." "I never got a letter." "I know," she said. "I figured." She reached across the table and slid a document toward me. "This is why I'm here now. This LLC, this investor scheme, your mother and your brother have been running it for almost 2 years. They needed a name with clean credit and no local entanglement. You were convenient. You were also far enough away that they didn't think you'd find out until it was too late." I picked up the document. It was a registration filing. My name, my social security number, my mother's address. Tyler listed as operations director. "She didn't just use me," I said. "No," Frances said. "She used you the same way she used me. The same playbook. Find the person who can be leveraged and use them until they push back." I looked at my aunt across that table. This woman who had been erased from my life before I was old enough to ask questions, and I felt something shift very quietly inside me. "Why now?" I asked her. "If you've been watching for 15 years, why now?" She folded her hands on the table. "Because this time she went too far. A civil fraud complaint with your name on it doesn't go away quietly. This could affect your professional license. You're standing with the state licensing board." She paused. "You're a social worker. You work with vulnerable people. If this follows you on paper, it follows your clients. I couldn't let that happen. That was the thing that broke something open in me. Not even the money. Not even the betrayal. The fact that my mother had endangered my ability to do the work I had chosen specifically because I wanted to be useful to people who had nobody else. She had reached into the one part of my life that was only mine and tried to take that too. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Tell me what we do next." What came next was not fast, and it was not clean, but it was thorough. Frances had 15 years of documentation, bank records, correspondence, the original business valuation from my grandfather's estate, sworn statements from former employees. Davis's firm filed a counter-complaint. The identity theft claim was bulletproof. The LLC was dissolved within 10 days by court order. My mother called me 4 days after the counter-complaint was filed. Not to apologize. Not to explain. She called me to tell me I was destroying the family. I let her talk for almost 2 minutes. I heard every word. The sacrifice. The hardship. The years of raising me alone after my father died. Tyler's struggles that she bore alongside him. My coldness, my distance, my ingratitude. I had heard this speech so many times that I could have recited it for her. When she stopped, I said, "I know about the LLC, Mom." Silence. "I know you used my name and my social. I know Tyler is listed as operations director. I know about the investors. The counter-complaint has been filed." Her voice, when it came back, was different. The performance was still there, but it was fraying at the edges. "Lydia, you don't understand the full picture. We were going to pay you back. It was temporary. We needed a name that the investors would trust. You needed an asset," I said. "You needed something you could use. And when I wasn't handing it over voluntarily, you just took it. That is not, I'm not going to fight with you about what it is," I said. "I'm telling you what happens now. My attorney will be in touch. Do not contact me again outside of that channel." I hung up. I want to be honest about how that felt. There was no triumphant rush. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired and sad and a little hollowed out. The way you feel after you've been sick for a long time and the fever finally breaks. The sickness is over, but you've still been sick. That part doesn't disappear. But underneath the tired, there was something else. Something quiet and solid. The sensation of having said a true thing out loud and meant it. The hearing was 6 weeks later. My mother and Tyler had retained an attorney who spent a lot of time arguing about family intention and shared assets, and the complicated nature of kinship. Davis presented the documentation. The identity theft evidence was conclusive. The forgery analysis on the LLC formation documents was unambiguous. Francis's affidavit, 15 years of careful, dated, organized documentation, was the kind of evidence that doesn't leave room for interpretation. The judge ruled in my name's favor on every count. The LLC dissolution stood. The fraud complaint against me was formally dismissed. My mother and Tyler were found liable for the fraudulent use of my identity and ordered to pay full restitution to the investors from their own assets. The family home in East Atlanta, the one my mother had used for years as a symbol of what she had built, was among the assets ordered for liquidation. I watched my mother's face during the reading of the judgment. The same face that had managed the narrative for so long. The face that had held the neighborhood, the church, the family in a particular story for decades. I watched it go very still and very old in the space of about 30 seconds. Not sad, exactly. More like a person who has been playing a very long game and just run out of moves. Tyler was on his phone. I don't know what he was doing. I don't think even he knew. That evening, Francis and I had dinner at a small restaurant near downtown. We talked for almost 3 hours. She told me about her life after Atlanta, the consulting work she'd built, the apartment in Nashville, the garden she'd started growing during the pandemic. I told her about my clients, the work, the particular kind of exhaustion and meaning that comes from sitting with people in the hardest moments of their lives. At some point, she reached into her bag and put a small envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," she said. Inside was a key and a folded piece of paper. The paper was a deed, a lake house in northern Georgia that my grandfather had bought in 1987 and that, according to the original trust documents Francis had preserved, was meant to pass to both sisters equally. "My mother never told me this existed," I said. "No," Francis said, "she wouldn't have." I looked at the key. It was old, the kind that opens a door that has weight to it. I had the property put into both our names last week, Francis said. "Equal shares, the way it was always supposed to be." She looked at me steadily. "It's not a gift, Lydia. It's a correction." I held the key in my palm for a long time without saying anything. There's a thing I say to my clients sometimes, when they're trying to untangle themselves from situations that have been wrong for so long that the wrongness started to feel like just the way things are. I tell them that clarity doesn't always arrive as a thunderbolt. Sometimes it arrives quietly as a series of small recognitions, a moment where you look at a pattern and you finally see it for what it is. Not because anything changed, because you finally stopped looking away. I drove back to Charlotte that night thinking about my mother. Not with anger, though the anger was still there, layered underneath. I thought about who she was before she became what she became. Whether there was a version of her that made a different set of choices. Whether the performing ever stopped, even in private. Whether she had ever told herself the true version of anything. I don't have answers to those questions. I probably never will. What I have is this: a key to a house I didn't know existed. An aunt I had been taught to fear, who turned out to be the most careful person I've ever met. A professional license that is clean and intact. A practice full of people who need someone steady in their corner. And the knowledge, settled now like something that has finally found its level, that I was never the problem. I was the solution they were trying to exploit. The capable one. The one who could handle it, and so was handed everything nobody else wanted to carry. I am done carrying it. The last time I looked at my phone before I went to bed that night, there was a text from my mother. I didn't open it. I went to my settings and I set her contact to Do Not Disturb. It wasn't dramatic. No slamming, no ceremony. Just a small, quiet, final thing. My therapist, yes, the social worker has a therapist, we all should, asked me once what I thought I'd feel when I finally stopped trying to manage my family's chaos. I told her I thought I'd feel free. She asked me what free meant to me. I didn't have an answer then. I think I do now. Free doesn't mean empty. It doesn't mean alone. It means the energy I used to spend on damage control is mine again, and I get to decide what I build with it. That's enough. For right now, that's more than enough. If this story sounds like yours, if you know what it is to be the one everyone calls when things fall apart, the one whose name gets used because it's the name that's trusted, I want to hear from you. Leave it in the comments. Tell me your version of this. Because I think there are more of us out here than any of us realize. And there is something in knowing you're not the only one who has been carrying something this heavy for this long. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Sometimes the thing a person needs isn't advice. It's just the recognition that what happened to them has a name, and they were not wrong for feeling the weight of it. I've thought a lot about what it actually costs to be the reliable one, not in some abstract, inspirational quote way. In the very concrete, dollars and cents, what did I actually give up way? And the honest answer is that I gave up more than money. I gave up years of trusting my own perception of things. Every time I wrote a check to cover Tyler's latest disaster, every time I absorbed my mother's guilt and turned it into a wire transfer, I was also making a quiet internal argument that I was wrong about what I was seeing, that it wasn't manipulation, that it was just family being complicated, that I was the one being difficult for noticing. That is the thing that took the longest to name, not the fraud itself. The fraud had a case number and a legal resolution and a judge's signature on a document. That part eventually got handled. What took longer was accepting that I had been doing a kind of emotional map for most of my adult life, where the answer always came out the same way, and I kept assuming I was calculating it wrong. Francis didn't save me. I want to be clear about that because I think it would be easy to read this story and take away that I was rescued by someone else's intervention, and that's not quite right. What Francis did was show up with 15 years of documentation and say, "Here is proof that your perception was accurate all along. She didn't change what happened. She just confirmed what I already knew and had been talking myself out of." That's a specific kind of gift. The gift of being believed by someone who was paying attention when everyone else was invested in the story going a different direction. What I keep coming back to is this. The actions my mother and Tyler took had a logic to them. They weren't random cruelty. They were a system. Find the person whose name carries weight, leverage that weight, extract value, and then manage any fallout with performance and guilt. That system worked for a long time because I let it work. I was a willing participant in my own depletion, and the day I stopped being willing was the day the system broke. Not because I became powerful, but because I became honest. With myself first, then with the lawyer, then with the judge. There's a version of this story where I spend the rest of my life angry at Sandra and Tyler, and honestly, some days I am. I'm human. But the more useful thing I found, the thing that actually takes up less space in me, is focusing on what the whole experience clarified. I know now what I'm willing to carry and what I'm not. I know the difference between helping because I want to and helping because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't. I know that saying no is not a personality flaw. It is, in fact, evidence that you understand your own value. Lydia is still practicing, still sitting with clients in the hardest moments of their lives, still driving the same Honda Civic, and somewhere in northern Georgia, there is a lake house with a door that opens with an old brass key, and it belongs equally to two women who were separated by a lie for 15 years and found their way back to each other through a courtroom. That's not a small thing. That's everything.